If you know he was bad for you, but you still miss him, you're not crazy. You're trauma bonded. You understand the red flags, but your body still craves him. I know exactly how shameful and confusing this contradiction feels because I used to hate myself for wanting his company when I knew how much he'd hurt me. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly what the trauma bond is, why it feels so addictive even when you know better, and the practical steps to break it, especially when you still miss him. But before we go further, I just want you to hear this. Missing him does not mean you should go back, and it doesn't mean you love him. It means your nervous system was conditioned. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's going on in your brain and your body, and you'll have a clear roadmap to start breaking that bond. So let's start with step 1. Understand what you're actually breaking. Most women try to break the trauma bond using logic. They list the red flags, they replay the bad moments, they tell themselves that he was so toxic. But that doesn't actually break the bond. And you find yourself still wanting him despite all of the red flags you just listed. Because a trauma bond is not a thought pattern. It's a conditioned nervous system response built through intermittent reinforcement. It's the high dopamine during the love bombing, the high cortisol during the devaluation, and the relief during the apology and the promises. And so your brain associates the relief with the source of the pain, which creates dependency. You feel worse after he withdraws and you feel euphoric when he returns. Your body associated him with regulation. And so if you're trying to just think your way out of this, you will stay stuck because you don't break trauma bonds cognitively first. You break them through the body. And once you actually understand that, the next step makes sense. And so step 2 is to stop feeding the dopamine loop. Maybe you might not want to admit this, but you keep checking his social media. Maybe you reread old messages or you imagine bumping into him on the street. And even if you don't contact him, mentally, you're still engaged. And what happens is each time you do this, your brain gets a tiny micro hit of dopamine, which keeps the loop alive. And so breaking the trauma bond involves interrupting this reward cycle. And no contact is not about punishment. It's actually about neurochemical withdrawal. Big word, I know. But essentially, your brain needs time to restabilize without that intermittent reinforcement from spying on them. Think of it like detox. It is going to feel worse before it feels better. And that does not mean you're failing. It means that the bond within you is being challenged, and that is a good sign. And so if you're digitally or mentally still connected, start by cutting one access point today. Maybe you block them. Maybe you delete your old messages. Maybe you throw out the things that they gave you during the relationship. And if you need support to stop the emotional spiral that might happen when you do one of these things, I'll leave a link to my free bond breaking method below. And this walks you through the exact 5-minute process to regulate your nervous system and retrain safety during this phase of withdrawal. So start there, especially if you feel like you're constantly being pulled back in or on the edge of a spiral. And now I want to prepare you because once the dopamine loop starts to weaken, something deeper might surface, which leads me into step 3, which is expecting grief. Because when the intensity fades, grief shows up. And many women misinterpret this grief as longing. You know, they might think, if I miss him this much, he mustn't be that bad. But the thing is, you're not grieving the person. You're grieving the fantasy, the potential, the version of him you fell in love with at the beginning, and the version of you before him that you lost. Because trauma bonds attached to hope, not to reality. You miss how he made you feel in the beginning, not at the end. And so when you feel the urge to go back or to reach out, I want you to ask yourself, am I missing him or am I missing relief? Because getting clear on this weakens the emotional distortion that's going on within your system. And that leads me to probably the most important step, which is regulate your nervous system without them. They became your emotional regulator because, only after arguments, only they could soothe you. Your system learned pain, reconciliation, relief. In other words, the pain never stopped unless they were the one to make you feel like everything was okay again. Either through a weak apology, future promising, I promise it won't happen again, or love bombing. And so now that they're gone, your system just feels unanchored because what is there to provide relief? And so you must build new regulation pathways, breath work, physical grounding techniques, co-regulation with safe people, or structured routines that actually stabilize your system. Because your brain needs repetition of safety without them. And the first time you calm yourself down without reaching for them, the bond weakens. So start with one regulation ritual daily. It doesn't have to be big, just start small, but same time, same method, and build that predictability for your system. And as your nervous system stabilizes, your clarity will naturally increase. Which brings us to the final step, which is to rebuild self-trust. Because trauma bonds don't just attach you to them, they detach you from yourself, from the highest version of you that lives within, because you stopped trusting your instincts, you overrode red flags, and you internalized blame. So breaking the bond isn't just about distance from them, it's about reconnection to you. And self-trust rebuilds through small kept promises, clear boundaries that are actually honored by you, and making decisions that are aligned with your truest values. So you say you won't check his profile, and you don't. That's self-trust rebuilding. It's really not as hard as most survivors think it is, because every kept boundary or promise or to-do that you actually tick off rewires your brain towards autonomy instead of dependency. And when autonomy strengthens, attachment weakens, and that higher version of you starts to come forth again. And so just to emphasize, if you still miss him, it doesn't mean you belong with him. It doesn't mean that you've lost your twin flame. It means your nervous system hasn't fully recalibrated yet. And trauma bonds break in stages. Understanding the conditioning, interrupting the dopamine loop, moving through grief, building new regulation within your system, and rebuilding self-trust. This is not about willpower, it's about rewiring. And if you want the exact 5-minute daily process to start with, click the link in the description for the free bond breaking method. And in my next video, I'll be breaking down why it's often the strong and smart women that end up trauma bonded to narcissists. Because once you can understand the mechanism, you stop blaming yourself. And that's where real healing begins. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you on the next one.